So we've done all of this naming of ionic compounds. Ionic compounds are between a metal and a nonmetal. Okay? Ionic compounds are between a metal and a nonmetal. That's important. Metals are found on what side of the periodic table?
Right.
Left.
Right.
Metals are found on the left side of the periodic table. Nonmetals are found on the right. Okay, so all of these compounds we've been making, have you noticed that the first part's from the left side of the periodic table, the second part's from the right side of the periodic table? That's because these have been ionic compounds. Okay, now we're going to introduce a whole new naming system for covalent compounds. All right, so we've done ionic. All of this naming you've been doing is for ionic compounds. Now we're going to move on to covalent. So covalent compounds are between two nonmetals. So that means all the portions of it, or all the elements of it, are from the right side of the periodic table. And we also include in that hydrogen, okay? Since hydrogen can float to the right side of the periodic table, we include hydrogen in these covalent bonds, or covalent compounds. Okay, your book calls these molecular compounds. I will call them covalent. All right, so they call them a molecular compound when it's between two nonmetals, but I still call them covalent. So if you turn to page 228 in your book, you're going to see these prefixes that you need to have down. Okay, so you need to write those down as a table in your notes and also get familiar with them. Chances are you've heard them before. So that's page 228 in your textbook. So covalent compounds are ones that take place between two nonmetals. Okay, so all on the right side of the periodic table. So like I said, carbon dioxide. This carbon, is it a metal or a nonmetal? Nonmetal. Oxygen is a metal or nonmetal? Nonmetal. Okay, so this is called carbon dioxide because there's two oxygen molecules. Okay, so this is a system of naming that we use for these covalent compounds. If we have carbon monoxide, this is what it looks like because there's only one oxygen. Mono. Okay? Yes?
So do you only use one of these, what are they called?
The prefixes?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Do you only use those on the ones that
Have a subscript?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? There's rules that we're going to follow, and I'll give you all the rules. Okay? So I want you to kind of start differentiating between an ionic compound and a covalent compound. So I'm going to write some compounds up here, and I want you to tell me whether they're ionic or covalent. Okay? So let's see. Ionic or covalent? Ionic. Okay, so the name of this molecule is what?
Sodium chloride.
Sodium chloride. So that's an ionic compound. We name it with the cation not taking a name change, and the anion ends in IDE. Okay, what about this molecule? Is it ionic or covalent? Covalent. Okay, so we are going to name that with a new system. And the name of this molecule is nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide. Okay, so you can start kind of seeing the patterns, but we're going to go through the rules for covalent compounds and covalent naming. Okay?
Wait, do you spell nitrogen like?
Oh,
Two ways to spell it?
No, I spelled it wrong.
I
Should be an
always see
O.
people spell it like that.
Oh, no, it's an O. Nitrogen. Here are the rules for naming covalent compounds. Okay? I'm just going to write them up here and we can talk about them as we go. The first rule is that the element with a smaller group number, or the element farther to the left, element with a smaller group number goes first in the naming process. So this would be elements that are farther to the left on the periodic table, remember, because our groups go from left to right. Okay, our second rule says the first element only gets a prefix if there's more than one of them. So first element only gets a prefix if there is more than one. Okay, so if you look at the table on page 229 now, it goes through all of these compounds between nitrogen and oxygen. Okay, so when you see NO, it's just called nitrogen monoxide. Right? The nitrogen gets no subscript or no prefix because it has no subscript. Okay, and then we'll go on to the second part of it, which says our second element always gets a prefix. Okay. Our second element always gets that prefix no matter what. And so the way it's written is prefix, and then the element name, or element base, root, and then it ends in IDE. Okay, so that's kind of the formula for our second element here. Monoxide. So you have to look at the root of that element. Okay, so it ends in IDE still. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this N2O3 on that table that you have on page 229. There's an element that says N2O3. The name for that molecule is dinitrogen because there's two nitrogen molecules. So dinitrogen, and then trioxide because there's three oxygen molecules. So trioxide. All right, does that part make sense? Okay, we have one little final rule here, and it's kind of nitpicky, but it's the way you spell things. So when there is a prefix, when the prefix ends in a vowel like mono or penta or tetra, things that end in the A or an O. So prefix that ends in A or O. You drop that letter. Drop that letter when the element begins with a vowel. And this makes a lot more sense when we just see it rather than see the rule for it. Okay, so the rule here is just pretty much saying that instead of writing monoxide, we would then drop this O off mono, and it says monoxide. Okay, so it makes more sense when you just see it like this than following the rule, but same way would go for penta. So instead of writing pentaoxide, it just becomes what? Pentoxide. Very good. Okay, so we just drop that final letter of the prefix to combine. Okay, so those are the rules for covalent compounds. We're going to do just some easy practice here, okay? So it's important to remember that the first portion of it, or that first element, doesn't get a prefix unless it has a subscript. Okay, so that just keeps its name. And there's no change to the name of the cation, it's just the prefix plus the, I guess it's not the cation, the first element. It's still an anion most of the time. All right, so let's try a couple here. Let's try the name of this. First of all, do we see that it's an ionic compound? Is it for sure an ionic compound?
Isn't it covalent?
It's covalent, you're right. It's a covalent compound. Don't let me mix those up. Okay, so this is for sure covalent. Very good. So let's see what the name of this would be. What do you think? Good. Iodine trichloride. Very good. Very good. All right, let's try this one. All right, we know it's covalent. So what would the name of this molecule be? Yeah, Michael.
Phosphorus pentabromide.
Phosphorus pentabromide.
Would we have the second word always be
Let's try it backwards here. So I'm going to give you the name. Okay. Anyone have it? Yeah, Alexis, go ahead. Into Cl3. Perfect. Okay, this system is easy to name in, right? You just have to remember the prefixes. That's it. Okay, as long as you memorize those prefixes, you're good to go. It's important to remember that this first word or this first atom only gets a prefix if it has a subscript. Okay, the second one gets a prefix no matter what. Okay, so if I have, let's say, this molecule, what would it be called?
Sulfur monoxide.
Yes, exactly. Sulfur monoxide. Okay. All right, that's it for these covalent naming system.